for the fantasy football season. And here's the top 12 quarterbacks I'm ranking this week. The first guy, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. So Josh Allen, we know he was the first quarterback taken off the board in most fantasy drafts this season. And so far, he's obviously whiffed up to that ranking going into the season. So far, Allen, he's gone over 30 fantasy points in the first 3 weeks of the season. And last week was a down game for him in terms of yards per pass and stuff like that, but he still finished with 400 yards in Miami. And this week here, week 4, Baltimore, I think this could be another shootout type of game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills, where Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, they just go touchdown for touchdown with each other, like we saw with the Dolphins in Baltimore in week 2. So Allen here, number 1 quarterback, no doubt about it. The guy taken first. And like I said, he's living up to the moniker right now. And this week here, I could see a shootout game between them and Baltimore. And it wouldn't be surprising to me if he gets anywhere from 30 to 40 fantasy points. Number 2, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. So it was between Lamar Jackson or Hurts for the 2 and 3 spot this week in my rankings. But Jalen Hurts, he's been playing great football and a guy who's really improved from last season to this season, even though I know it's only 3 games and he had some easy matchups versus Detroit, Washington in the early going in the first 2-3 games of the season here. This week, it's another pretty decent matchup, even though I know this Jaguar defense has been playing good football. But Jalen Hurts, he's going out there and he's putting up numbers and he's not relying on his legs. He's got 2 great receivers in Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, who's been a big acquisition that opens all up for the offense, including Dallas Goedert. So right here this week, in week 4 versus Jacksonville, I don't know if he'll reach 30 points again after the last 2 outings. In week 2 versus Minnesota, 36 fantasy points. In week 3 in Washington with 33. But right here, week 4, I think versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, you could pencil him in for 25 to the 30-point range here is Jalen Hurts. And he's definitely a quarterback on the rise and a guy you can't sleep on anymore. And I think he's for real. Just the only thing, he's got to stay healthy, because last week he did take a few hits. Number 3, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. So Lamar Jackson's on an MVP tear in the first 3 weeks of the season, putting up some monster fantasy games, including the last 2 weeks. And we know this Buffalo Bill defense, one of the best, if not the best defense in the league. But at this point, the way Lamar Jackson's playing and running the football for rushing yards and touchdowns, there's just no reason you're going to shy away from starting him in your fantasy leagues. And we know he's playing for that contract, and that's why I think those numbers are up as well. Lamar Jackson last season didn't have a great year, but this year he's taking it to a new level. Week 1 at the Jets, 213 pass yards, 3 touchdowns in it though. Week 2 versus Miami, 318 pass yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 119 rushing, and a rushing TD. And then last week, 5 total touchdowns, once again for Lamar Jackson versus New England, with 107 rushing yards. And this one, I don't know if he's going to rush for 100 yards in this ball game. That would be very tough to do with 3 games in a row. But if any quarterback could do it, obviously nowadays, it's Lamar Jackson. And I'm not going to be scared of him this week in this matchup versus Buffalo. So I got him at number 3. Number 4, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Herbert, he's been banged up with the rib injury since the end of week 2's ball game versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And in week 3, you definitely could tell it was hurting his team, obviously. But Herbert's a gamer. He's a tough guy, and he went out there and he gutted it out. And that obviously was his worst fantasy day of the season in week 3. But week 4 here, with some rest, more treatment during the week, and Keenan Allen possibly coming up to the starting lineup once again. They'll face his injury with the hamstring. I think Justin Herbert in this one, an indoor game at Houston, he gets going. And this Texan defense, I know they've been playing good football, or at least decent football on the defensive side of things. But right here, this week, I think Justin Herbert, especially with Keenan Allen back, is going to be a guy that's going to score anywhere from 25 to 30 fantasy points and get healthier as the season goes on. But right now, it's a good matchup. I think Herbert in this one, he'll get back on track, get his number 1 weapon back on the offense here, and have a big game. Number 5, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Patrick Mahomes, it's been up and down so far this season in terms of fantasy football, even though we know this Chief team is 2-1 on the season. Well, right here, the last 2 weeks, Mahomes, he hasn't gone out there and put up huge numbers. Week 2 versus the Chargers, 235 pass yards, 2 touchdowns in that one. Then week 3 at Indianapolis, a mediocre ball game, 262 pass yards, touchdown, interception, 26 rush yards, and a 2-point conversion. So right here, I got him in number 5 this week because of the tough matchup at Tampa Bay. We know this defense is good. We know they got a good secondary. And they've been holding opposing offenses down for the most part, is this Tampa Bay Buck defense. So right here, Patrick Mahomes, after coming off of 2 mediocre ball games for his standards with 21 and 20 fantasy points, I think he has a good game. Him versus Brady. You know, these guys want to give it their all. Sunday Night Football, nationally televised game here. And I think Patrick Mahomes in this one has a bounce-back week and a nice game. Number 6, Kyla Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. So Kyla Murray, he's been pretty decent so far in the early going. Last week, I know he didn't have a great game, but he still threw for over 300 yards in that one versus stingy Rams defense. So week 1 versus Kansas City, 193 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 29 rush yards, a 2-point conversion. And week 2 with the Raiders in that great comeback victory, 277 pass yards, touchdown, he threw 28 rush yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. So right here, believe it or not, Kyla Murray this season, he hasn't reached 100 yards rushing. He's not running the football as much. But he's got a pretty decent offense around him, even with DeAndre Hopkins suspended for a few more games here. Greg Dortch has emerged. Rondale Moore, he's probably coming back this week or next week, the latest. And Zach Ertz, he's been a good target at tight end. And Hollywood Brown, a great addition with 14 catches last week. So right here with a pretty good matchup at Carolina, even though they look pretty good versus the Saints in the first half of that game. I think Kyla Murray could get going, and I think this could be the biggest game for him of the season to date. The next guy, Joe Burrow at Cincinnati Bengals. So Joe Burrow so far in this Bengal team off to a slow start, 1-2 on the season. But Joe Burrow, he's had still pretty decent fantasy days. I know week 1, 5 turnovers, but he still finished with 338 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 47 rushing at 2-point conversion, 4 intros, a fumble loss. Week 2 with Dallas, mediocre game, 199 pass yards, a touchdown, 26 rush yards, a 2-point conversion. And week 3 at the Jets, 275 pass yards and 3 touchdowns. So T. Higgins, he's going to play in this ball game. I thought after taking that big hit, Higgins wouldn't be there. And they're going to need all the help they could get. This Miami defense is the real deal. And this Miami team, I think, is the real deal as well, obviously. 3-0 to start the season. And this could be a mini shootout on Thursday Night Football in its own. So right here, Joe Burrow, he's got good weapons. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon should be healthy in this ball game as well, catching the ball out of the backfield. Tyler Boyd, who went over 100 yards last week. And this week here versus pretty tough Miami defense, I still think he has a good ball game. And I got him at number 7. Number 8, Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. I think Rodgers, he might have found his number 1 receiver now in Romeo Doubs. Him and Doubs had good rapport. Him and Robert Tonyan, they were hitting on some passing catches as well in this ball game. And Alan Lazard even found the end zone as well. And old reliable Randall Cobb made a few good catches in that ball game versus a tough Tampa Bay Buck defense. So right here, the last 2 weeks, Rodgers, he's had mediocre games for his standards, but 20 and then 21 fantasy points. Last week, week 2 versus Chicago, 234 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 rush yards, a fumble loss. And then week 3 at Tampa Bay, 255 pass yards, 2 touchdowns and info. So Rodgers, he's trying to find, obviously, a guy to step up, and I think Doubs is that guy. Obviously, none of these guys are going to be a Devontae Adams, but who really is? If he could just spread that football around and have a true number 1 option, his numbers are going to go up as the weeks go on. In the next 3 games, he's got great matchups. This week versus New England, I think he could pick them apart. We just saw Lamar Jackson in that ball game go for over 45 fantasy points. Then he's got the Giants, Jets, Washington coming up. So the next 4 games here for Aaron Rodgers, I like the matchups a lot. And this week here, I got him in number 8, number 9, Kirk Cousins on the Minnesota Vikings. So Kirk Cousins, it's been up and down as usual for him to start the season. Week 1 versus Green Bay, a nice victory for the Vikings. It was 277 pass yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 2 at Philly, 221 pass yards, a touchdown, 3 interceptions. Couldn't get anything going on Monday Night Football and 20 rush yards. And then last week, another solid game, 260 pass yards, 2 touchdowns. So right here, week 4 in a London ball game, it's New Orleans Saints here. This is going to be possibly a shootout between these 2 teams. And for some reason in London, we always see more offense than defense. So right here, he's got great weapons. Justin Jefferson, I know the last 2 weeks has been quiet, but Adam Thielen's been getting more targets and finding the end zone. Irv Smith Jr. had a good ball game in week 2. Week 3 didn't do much. I think he bounces back. And Dalvin Cook, even though he hurt his shoulder in this ball game, he's going to play through it like he has before with the shoulder injury. So right here with the good weapons for Kirk Cousins and a pretty plus matchup versus the Saints this week here, I got him in number 9. Number 10, Tom Brady, Tampa Bay Bucks. A lot of people writing Brady off, but I'm not going to write him off here. And this week, a lot of reinforcements possibly coming back to the lineup. Mike Evans, we know he's coming back. He's off the 1-game suspension. Chris Godwin, he's been limited in practice, and so is Julio Jones. If he gets 2 of those 3 guys back here, he's got reliable weapons. And Tom Terrific, we know he still could get the job done. I know it's been tough sledding for him in the early going. Week 1 at Dallas, 212 pass yards, a touchdown, and then week 2 at New Orleans, 190 pass yards, a touchdown, and a fumble loss. And then week 3 versus Green Bay, he got his team down there, but they just couldn't get the 2-point conversion at the end of the game to tie it up. 271 pass yards and a touchdown, playing with 4th and 5th receivers as his main guys. But this week he'll get reinforcements back. This Chief defense, I don't think, is really that great in the secondary, especially with Tyrann Mathieu leaving in free agency. And I think this week here, Brady's going to turn some heads once again, have his best game to date this season. And I got him in number 10. Number 11, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. So Jared Goff quietly has had a pretty solid season here in the first 3 games of the season. I know so far in the early practice reports, Amon St. Brown and Josh Reynolds haven't practiced, and TJ Hawkinson. So those are 3 pretty crucial guys to this offense over here for this Lion team. Week 1 versus Philly, 215 pass yards, 2 touchdowns in it, though. Week 2 versus the Washington Commanders, 256 pass yards, 4 touchdowns in that ball game. And then week 3 in Minnesota, he still had the yards, but only 1 touchdown and an intro. But right here, week 4, Detroit back home versus the Seattle Hawks. And I think he could exploit this secondary. This secondary isn't that good. They give up at least 1 or 2 touchdowns per game to quarterbacks here. And as long as Amon St. Brown is healthy and ready to go in this ball game, Jared Goff's a guy, depending on the matchup, that you could possibly start in deeper leagues weekly. So right here, I like him at number 11. Amon St. Brown's been a true number 1 going back to last season in the last 7-8 games that he's played in. And he's got weapons. DJ Chark, he can make a few plays on the outside. TJ Hawkinson as a tight end, still pretty decent. So right here, he's got good weapons. He's got a good matchup. And I got him in number 11. And the 12th and final quarterback I got this week here is Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Trevor Lawrence, he's looked like a totally different quarterback going from last season in Urban Meyer's offense to this season with Doug Peterson. And this is a revenge type of ball game here for Peterson. After winning a Super Bowl with this Philly team as the head coach, now he's the Jacksonville Jaguars head coach, and he's got these guys playing good football and winning some ball games pretty easily over the last 2 weeks. Week 2 versus Indianapolis, they won that one 24-0. And Trevor Lawrence, a nice ball game, 235 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 11 rushing yards. And week 3 at the Chargers, a monster game for him, 262 pass yards, 3 touchdowns, 7 rush yards, and a 2-point conversion. So I know the Philadelphia Eagles are a very tough defense, no doubt about it. And I got him ranked number 3 in my top 12 defensive rankings. So if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. But Trevor Lawrence here, he's a quarterback that's growing. We know he was a great college football player and a great high school football player. And this season, they got him real weapons around there. Christian Kirk, I didn't think he would be this good, but he's been a legit weapon on that offense. Zay Jones, he's been solid as well. Another guy I thought they overpaid in the offseason, but he's paying dividends. Evan Ingram, he's a serviceable tight end. Then James Robinson, he's back to form. And Travis Etienne as a decent passing downs back. So he's got a lot of weapons around him, a lot of speed, and I think they could possibly exploit that in this Philly secondary here. So Trevor Lawrence, it wouldn't be surprising to me if we see him go over 20 fantasy points this week here. And I've got him number 12. Another guys who were close to making the top 12. Obviously, this week, Tua was in the conversation, but I just don't like the matchup for him. And he's banged up as well. And also Russell Wilson, I like the matchup for him, but I don't know what you're going to get from him. And Derek Carr as well, not the greatest of matchups, and he's pretty much, his ceiling's been at 20, 22 fantasy points. But anyway, that's the top 12 quarterbacks I'm ranking here for week 4 of the fantasy football season.